Now, streaming live across the heart of Cowboys country, it's your opportunity to ask questions to Cowboys insider Mickey Spagnola. This is Silver Star Nation Interactive.
For the first time this season, we gather after a Cowboys loss. Hello, everybody. I'm Wes Moore. Mickey Spagnola joins us from the Star in Frisco. Mickey, last week the Cowboys were 3-0, and we asked everyone to submit their questions on Twitter using the hashtag AskMickey. And I'll be honest, there weren't a whole lot of questions. Funny thing happens, Mickey. The Cowboys lose, and now we've got all kinds of questions on Twitter. You ready to go?
Maybe we get more popular the more they lose, huh? I don't know if it's supposed to work that way.
Yeah, I find that with talk radio too. When the team loses, people are mad and they want to call in. When they win, everything's good, and it's just crickets out there. So well, we got plenty of questions to get to them, so let's get started. Lane is up first.
Right.
Lane Hancock asks, what happened to the Cowboys passing game Sunday, and what could it mean for the rest of the season?
I don't think you take any long-term effects off of just one game. I think that the New Orleans Saints sort of made a bet that they weren't going to allow the Cowboys to get the ball downfield the way they played their defense. They played a cover two for most of the game, and they said, okay, here's our bet. We're going to make sure your wide receivers don't beat us, and we think our defensive line can stop the running game without loading the box, and they absolutely won that bet. I thought the Saints defensive line did a wonderful job against the Cowboys running game, holding Ezekiel Elliott to just 35 yards, the Cowboys to 45 yards, and then it made it difficult on the passing game because of how they were playing so much double coverage over the top. So you got to tip your hat to the Saints. They had a good game plan. They analyzed their personnel, and it paid off that their defensive line did a better job than the Cowboys' offensive line did.
Next up is Griffin. Question is, why was it so easy for the offense to move the ball in the third quarter and not in the fourth quarter?
I saw that question. Maybe it was because they only had one possession in the third quarter, and they drove the ball down the field. They didn't convert a couple third downs in the fourth quarter, and the one that hurt the worst was the second possession when they had, on first down, they threw a 9-yard pass to Blake Jarwin. It should have been a 10-yard pass. Jarwin cut his route off a little bit short, and he came back to the ball. And on 2nd and 1, they got stuffed, and on 3rd and 1, Dak threw behind Randall Cobb, and it was an incompletion, and they had to punt. So they got the ball back, though, with not enough time to move close enough to get a field goal, but on that final possession, they got near. They were within a 70-yard field goal attempt. They needed 10 more yards, probably needed 10 more seconds, too.
To follow up on that, what do you think is the longest field goal attempt they would have tried in that scenario? Yeah,
we asked that question, and I think the answer from Jason Garrett has been low 60s, somewhere between 62, 63. I think 65 would have stretched it just a little bit, but with an indoor facility like that and no weather elements, I think 62, 63. So they needed another 10 yards, I think, to try that field goal. And I don't know, as much noise in there, I don't know if that stops the ball from flying as far as it needs to.
With that 10 yards from offensive pass interference, would that have been the 10 yards you're looking for?
I'll tell you what, yeah, and the 10-second runoff, too. That was just a killer. When you go back and look at the play and you go, what? What did they call? You know, the defensive guy was kind of riding Amari Cooper, and when he turned, the guy lost his balance and fell backwards, and the official interpreted that he pushed off, and it sure didn't look like he pushed off to me. Same thing with the other call. You know, while his arm was out, he was just trying to get the defensive man's, Lattimore's hand off of him. So I think that's fair. Sometimes I wonder how these calls are made.
Next up is David. He wants to know when we can start criticizing Travis Frederick and Zach Martin.
Well, I don't know that everybody had as good a game as they needed to, but here's what I think people need to understand, Wes. The noise in that place is real. And it's really an advantage. And I was talking to some of the folks in the Saints locker room, and they pointed it out right away. It's like when you're on offense and you got to go on a silent count, it's advantage defensive line because they're looking at the ball. The offensive linemen can't look at the ball, and they're not hearing anything. They're just going on timing. And so the defensive guy gets a step, a half a step on the offensive lineman, and it does make a difference. I've seen it before. It happened to the Cowboys in 2009 when they had to play that playoff game against the Minnesota Vikings, and the offense just fell apart, and it was a pretty good offense all season long. They couldn't protect Romo. They couldn't run the ball. And again, in this one, I just thought the upper hand went to the Saints' defense, and you got to give credit. Those people in that stadium were as loud on the last play of the game as they were the first play of the game. They never, ever let up, and it makes it difficult on an offense.
All right, let's go to Twitter and get another question. Why was Haidar in the game so much in place of Tank Lawrence?
They've been doing, they had a rotation going. They've had this rotation going. Haidar kind of helps him out because he can play not only inside but defensive end. And Lawrence did bang his shoulder a little bit. He came out for a while and then went back in. So they're just trying to keep those guys as fresh as they can.
Ryan Roberts has our next question. He asked, why did the Cowboys not look to employ more zone read or screens throughout the game? I thought that would be a good second-half adjustment.
Yeah, and I think maybe the screens would have been. But again, you know, when you're doing zone reads, the beauty of that is your ability to run the football. Well, when you're not running the football, then no one's biting on the handoff, right? So that's what makes that difficult. Even the screen passes, you know, the run sets up so many things, and they just couldn't quite, you know, run the ball. I think they thought that the way to do it was dump the ball out to Zeke and try to get him in one-on-one situations. And the other thing is, I think some of that stuff, like one of the questions I've been getting is, why didn't they have more motion? Why didn't they have things like that? And again, when you can't hear well, you try to simplify things. Now they did, you know, accomplish not having any false starts. That helps, but maybe it got too simple. I don't know, to combat the noise.
All right, sports fan C. Stan asks, how big of a difference do you think having Gallup, Antoine Woods, and Crawford in the Saints game would have made?
Well, I think, yeah, I think that certainly would have helped. Anytime you have your starters in there, I think it helps out. I don't know about Crawford so much because his replacement, Robert Quinn, was a man in that game. Crawford might have helped out some inside with his experience. I know Woods would. And I think Gallup would have made it more difficult on that Saints defense to cut off both wide receivers. But they were doubling those outside guys pretty good, which was one of the reasons why they were having trouble getting any chunk plays down the field. But there's a chance that Gallup could be back this week. His rehab has been going really well these first 2 days of the week. And I think he's got a chance to be back for this game, and that would certainly give the Cowboys a boost.
Dallas man, 1976, definitely a fan of the Doomsday defense. He's asking, why is this year's defense not hungry nor aggressive like last year's defense? Other than Robert Quinn, no one acts like they are hungry at all.
What was the guy's name? I forgot. Sportsman or what was
Dallas
it? Sports
man.
fan?
Dallas man, 1976.
Dallas man. How many points did they give up? They gave up 12 points and not a touchdown. And so I understand the Saints kind of held the ball a while, but they locked down in 12 points. If you'd have told me before the game that they would hold Alvin Kamara to no more than 89 yards from scrimmage and only give up 12 points, I'd have bet a lot of money and lost it that they would have won the game.
All right, were we outcoached against the Saints?
Of course, you never get outplayed, you get outcoached. I understand that one too. I thought Sean Payton had a really good game plan offensively to protect Teddy Bridgewater. He didn't want to expose him. He didn't ask him to do too much. A lot of short passes, a lot of dump-offs to Kamara, and that great game plan got him all of 12 points.
Next question comes from O'Day. What happened behind number 77? That's a monster game every time. I got to admit, I thought they might run a little bit more out to the outside, Mickey.
And I agree with you. And I'm not sure what the reason was that they didn't try to get the ball on the edges, because I thought that's where Seattle had some success running the ball. It wasn't up the middle. It was on the edges. But again, you would have to look at the alignment and see how they were lined up and what they were doing with their linebackers. So those are some of the things that you can't see on TV or you don't recognize. But I thought that also, that getting the ball outside might have helped out a little bit more.
Okay, here's a question from Griffin. We are up against arguably, I'm glad you put arguably in there, a more formidable defense against Green Bay Sunday. Do you think we fare better or worse?
Well, I don't know about formidable defense.
Yeah.
What did the Packers do in that last game, right? It wasn't so formidable. As a matter of fact, it's kind of strange because the Saints defense wasn't exactly formidable against Seattle. They put up 515 yards on them. So yeah, you just can't base what happens in one game to the next game, because you never know how these things are going to turn out. So yeah, we'll see what happens. You know, a lot of it has to do with how the Packers decide to play it. Are they going to load up and say, we're going to stop the run and we'll take our chances with our defensive backs in man situations? Or are they going to do the same thing the Saints did and said, you know what, our defensive front's good enough to stop the run. We're going to make sure you don't get the ball to Amari Cooper or Michael Gallup or Devin Smith, if whoever's in the game, and beat us. So it'll be an interesting matchup. And as for trying to get the ball to Randall Cobb, I'm sure they're very sure of what Randall Cobb can do too, by the way.
You know, Mickey, the Saints may have shown a blueprint in a way to beat the Cowboys, but I don't know if other teams can do that. I mean, the Saints' defensive line is really good, and Demario Davis is a heck of a run stopper at linebacker. I think that's part of the problem. The defensive line just won the game for New Orleans. I don't know if other teams have a defensive line to the caliber of what they saw.
Yeah, and I'm with you on that. I know a lot of people want to talk about blueprint, but you got to have the personnel to employ that blueprint and make it work. So you can't just have a bunch of Joes up there, and the Saints certainly don't. They've got 4 first-round picks on their defensive front.
All right, next question. A coach can call a play based on what he thinks the defense will be in, but it's up to the QB to go to the line and make audibles in real time. Jan is asking, after 3 full seasons, is Dak changing the plays enough?
Did you see him working really hard to change the plays? And again, the noise is real. You can't get to the line of scrimmage. No one can hear you. Did you see how many times Ezekiel Elliott had to come up to hear what he changed the play to because he couldn't hear the call? So you're limited in what you can do. I wish people, I think everybody should have a bucket list. Go to New Orleans for a Sunday night Saints game and experience it and see what it's like when those folks there, the 74,000, and there were a lot of Cowboy fans, but you wouldn't know it. 74,000 people had all day long to get ready for the game, if you know what I mean. I went out for a long walk at about 9:30 or 10, and people were already setting up a tailgate for a 7:20 kickoff. So it's real hard to do audibles at the line of scrimmage.
Mickey, I've been to all the SEC stadiums except for Vanderbilt and a lot of the stadiums in Texas. The only football stadium louder than the Dome I've ever heard is AT&T Stadium. The one year they had 100,000 in there for New Orleans of all games. But that place is so loud, you can't talk to the person sitting next to you in the stands.
No, and what they've done, and you don't understand the Superdome, the way it's built, there's no place for the noise to escape. It just kind of reverberates. And when they redid the Dome and they built a new press box after Katrina, it's way at the top. So we're at the very top of the stadium, and it's hard to hear yourself think up there, let alone converse. So yeah, it's a difficult place to play, and it's definitely a home field advantage, and even more of a home field advantage when somebody probably from the New Orleans area's got his finger on the clock button.
The longest 2 seconds, the longest 4 seconds in your life, right? That's where you want to go when the doctor
amazing.
tells you you got 4 seconds to live.
Yeah, it was like one of the coaches told me, he goes, you know, you can't take a snap from center and spike the ball to stop the clock in less than 2 seconds. And this guy took a two-step drop, threw the ball out of bounds, no one touched it, and the clock only ticked away 2 seconds. The clock's not supposed to stop until the ball hits the ground, all right? And that clock stopped as soon as the ball cleared the sideline, and it didn't start on time. So somebody tried to explain it, well, maybe it was like 0.49 seconds, you know, or something, you know, there was the hundredth of a second there was closer to 5. And it's like, I don't care what it was. The clock didn't start on time, and it didn't stop on time. So that's why I think Jason, after the game, said it was the fastest play in NFL history.
You know, it's a disappointing loss, and I get it, but to me it boils down, and I hate to simplify it, but you can't turn the ball over 2 times. And then they had a chance to catch the ball in the end zone early on, and Dak just barely misses the wide receiver. And then there was another key third down play where you drop that ball or it's a little bit behind the receiver. They had opportunities, just didn't make the plays, or in 2 cases they fumbled the ball. And you can't do that on the road against a really good team.
If you go back and look at my keys to the game for Saturday night for the Silver Star Nation, one of them was no gifts for the Saints, and they gave them 2 fumbles. You lose 2 fumbles like that. It's hard to win a game when you turn the ball over. It's hard to win a game when you have a 1st and 10 at the 11-yard line and you end up kicking a field goal. That's 4 points you left on the field. You lost by 2, right? And then the 1 fumble on the 4th down play that it was a gamble, but they won the gamble. They picked up the 1st down, and then you fumble the ball and you give the Saints an opportunity to come back. And with 4 seconds to go from the 1-yard line, they managed to run 2 plays and got a field goal. That's 3 points. You lost by 2. So, yeah, there's other things that are more tangible of why you lose the game.
And that was a fumble where his elbow was down, right? No, I don't want to get into that.
And I forgot to point that. I forgot to point that part out too. I don't know why they have replay when you can see it as clear as day, and you're too scared to make to change the call. Maybe they felt like the Saints have been on the short end of too many of these reviews, so they decided to give them a break. I don't know.
Mickey, before we go, we got to talk about the Packers real quick. With the Cowboys, you know, with the bad taste in their mouth, I just feel like this sets up good for the Cowboys, a chance to bounce back and improve a lot of things, plus being at home. What do you think of this matchup?
Well, the thing that I know for sure is, you know, they got after Teddy Bridgewater. They ended up sacking him 5 times, and they had a whole bunch of hurries. Well, that's got to happen again to Aaron Rodgers. Now, he's hard to get on the ground. I get it. But, boy, when I watched him play that last game, he was zinging passes all over the place. It's incredible how fast he gets the ball off and how hard he throws the ball and so accurately. So, to me, it's again after Aaron Rodgers. They need pressure. And if they can get another performance, Wes, from Robert Quinn, the way they got Sunday out of him, they will have a better opportunity of controlling Rodgers enough to maybe be able to hold him to a reasonable amount of points. They've got to get pressure on him, and they've got to keep him in the pocket. They can't let him keep extending plays because, boy, is he awfully good at that.
Great stuff, Mickey. Thank you. Once again, we appreciate it, and we'll see you next Tuesday for the Silver Star Nation Interactive. Have a good week, Mickey.
Thank you, Wes.
And we will be back here next Tuesday at 3. And, of course, you'll see Mickey all week right here on the Silver Star Nation. Have a great week, everybody.